Hello, and welcome to Public Policy Square, a 16th Council podcast. I'm your host, Annette Sorensen. I have here with me today Dr. Brian Rubin, the founder and executive chairman of the 16th Council. Dr. Rubin, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me, NF.
Great. Today we will be discussing China's competitive strategy and why it has been so difficult for other nations to contain it. I wanted to begin with asking about China's industrial policy. So how
Okay.
has industrial policy allowed for China's rapid economic growth?
That's quite an interesting question. China's economic rise is fundamentally a result of its state-led industrial policy. As you know, unlike Western economies like the United States and other Western economies that rely on market forces, China is different. China has taken a highly strategic approach where the government plays a direct role in directing investments, setting priorities, and shielding domestic industries from competition. So there are three key pillars of this approach. And the first one of them is state-owned enterprises. And then the second one is heavy subsidies. And then the third is strategic investment. I'll try to say a little bit more about each of that. With the state-owned enterprises, the Chinese government retains majority control over key sectors such as banking, energy, and telecommunications. This ensures that strategic industries align with national interests rather than short-term profit motives. Then heavy subsidies. You see, China provides substantial financial support to companies in key industries, allowing them to undercut international competition and dominate global markets. And then lastly, strategic investments. And here you see the government channels vast resources into emerging technologies and infrastructure, ensuring that China stays ahead in critical fields such as AI, electric vehicles, semiconductors. So by maintaining a firm grip on economic direction, China has been able to outmaneuver market-driven economies in key sectors. So rather than leaving things to market forces to determine, China takes control of the situation by itself. The government does that, and that's what the industrial policy looks like in China.
I see. Do you view this as a model that other countries could follow? Should other countries follow China's lead and invest in industrial policy?
No, every country must determine its own economic strategy. It's a very bad approach to copy and paste. So every country must determine its own approach by ignoring industrial policy entirely. Ignoring industrial policy entirely has also put Western economies at a disadvantage. But you know something about strategy is that a strategy will always you always have opportunities for growth. If you take a particular approach, you then will be foregoing the benefits of the other approach. And from the get-go, a strategist should know that by choosing something, you are rejecting another. So ignoring that entirely has put Western economies at a disadvantage. While a purely state approach may not work in free market democracies, Western nations need to recognize that China's approach is not accidental, right? It didn't just happen. It's a result of a long-term government-backed strategy. So to compete, countries like the US and European nations, African nations as well, must invest in domestic manufacturing to reduce dependency on China or any other economy for that matter. And they must support strategic industries such as AI, semiconductors, and renewable energy. And we can actually see the US government making moves that suggest they have this understanding, see, wanting mineral rights from in Ukraine and all of that are pointing in that direction. And then strengthen public-private partnerships to align economic policies with national interests. So without a clear counter strategy, China will continue to expand its dominance in global markets.
I see you mentioned decreasing reliance on China. and investing in domestic manufacturing. So how does China currently dominate global supply chains?
No, that's a very fantastic question, and I thank you for asking that. China has what we can call China has structured its economy to be indispensable to global supply chains, and these are the ways they've succeeded in doing that. The first is manufacturing dominance. I'm not sure you'd be surprised to know that China produces over 30% of the world's industrial output, making it nearly impossible for companies to relocate without major disruptions. And then, secondly, China controls over 60% of the world's rare earth minerals, which are critical for electronics, defense, renewable energy, and name them. Any disruption in Chinese supply severely impacts global industries. And then the famous BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, which has had China build infrastructure across Asia, Africa, Latin America, securing long-term trade routes and economic dependencies. And this has been such a complex project. It's been heavily criticized, but been criticized on the grounds of ethics and a lot of other concerns. But in geopolitics, emotions don't apply in geopolitics. Really, it is interests that apply. So, but these are the ways that China has positioned itself. China has embedded itself deeply into global production networks. China has made itself nearly irreplicable in modern economy, and this isn't happening all of a sudden. It was predetermined, well planned, and it's been well executed.
Given China's centrality in global supply chains, how could countries such as the United States counter China's dominance?
That is possible. The US and its allies must take proactive steps. I think Donald Trump is making some of such moves. And the first will have to be we've got to diversify supply chain by reducing reliance on China, by investing in domestic manufacturing and strengthening trade relationship with other regions. Another way is investing in alternative sources of rare earth minerals. Countries like the US, Australia, and Canada must develop their own resources to reduce dependence. And then lastly, go to strengthen your trade alliances, right? The West must counter China's influence by enhancing partnership in Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. But without coordinated action like this, Western economies must remain vulnerable to China's supply chain dominance.
Looking at sector-specific dominance, how does China currently play a leading role in technology and artificial intelligence?
Okay. So China's approach to AI technology differs, very much from the US in three key areas. Three areas. It could be more, but first of all, is centralized strategy. Unlike the US, where AI development is driven by private corporations, China has a government-coordinated AI strategy. Now, this allows faster deployment and integration of AI into industries. Then you have surveillance and big data. China uses AI for large-scale data collection and governance, making it a global leader in facial recognition and cybersecurity. And again, massive state investment, billions of dollars have been poured into AI research, positioning China to challenge US dominance in tech. So if the West fails to coordinate this AI strategy, right, China will likely surpass the US in key areas of technological development. But with Donald Trump making statements like he wants the United States to be the leader in AI, and also his policies that gear towards the regulation, those might be good moves, but we wait to see how those turn out. But the West must coordinate this AI strategy, otherwise you can't stop China.
Okay, I see. We know that China currently is both politically and economically powerful. What are the country's current political and economic alliances, and how powerful or impactful are these on a global scale?
China has been very strategic and it's through the years. China moves quietly and then they execute ruthlessly. From an agrarian economy to what they have become today, and they continue to grow, right? China has built a vast network of global alliances, including with the BRICS. That means Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This helps them, to strengthen economic ties outside Western influence. And then Russia, strategic energy and defense partnership, particularly after Western sanctions on Russia, as a result of the Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And then Africa and Latin America, heavy investments in infrastructure, with the BRI we talked about before now, securing long-term resource access, and beyond that, improving their soft power, right? Because when you can pay China, you renegotiate those deals. China just has a lot of influence on you. You're likely to vote in their favor at the UN and all of that. So this, and then you get to Middle East. You also see China is strengthening oil and gas ties with Saudi Arabia and even Iran. Now, these alliances allow China to operate independently of Western economic systems, making containment efforts ineffective, really very difficult.
And we've established China as a current global superpower. Why is it that efforts to counter China's rise have failed by countries like the United States?
Absolutely. That's an intriguing question. And okay, so efforts to contain China have been largely unsuccessful for a number of reasons. One is interdependence. The global economy is still reliant on Chinese manufacturing and trade. That's the reason why you see Donald Trump trying to impose all the tariffs on China. This is it. There's a lot of dependence on China, right? In terms of manufacturing and trade. And then state-controlled resilience. Unlike free market economies, China's government can cushion its industries against economic pressure. And then you have long-term strategic planning. And China plans decades ahead. Like I mentioned earlier, China plans quietly and moves and executes, ruthlessly. They plan decades ahead. While Western economic policies could change with political cycles, right? So you see, all of the policies of President Joe Biden have now been cancelled. With Trump being in office, right? So, that way, it's not that way with China. There is consistency through the years, and that has its advantage. And then we have a multipolar world order. The rise of BRICS and other economic blocs has diluted Western dominance. So China has simply adapted to every challenge, making Western countermeasures ineffective.
I see. Given that these efforts have failed, how could new efforts be successful? You've mentioned coordinated planning, diversification of supply chains. What are other moves that countries may make to counter China?
Okay. They'll have to invest in domestic production to reduce reliance on China. I mean, if China, doesn't matter what China produces and how big they produce that, if you don't buy that, then China has a problem, right? And they've got to strengthen international alliances outside China's sphere of influence. And then countries have got to develop the long-term economic strategy that prioritizes national interest over short-term political gains, right? I mean, let's use the US, for example, because over the past number of weeks in January 20, the world has been about Donald Trump, actually, and America. So you see that even in America, opinions and responses to policies are divided. Those who are, the Democrats who want to say something wrong with everything Trump does, and Republicans will have to find a way to say something good with everything he does, and it's just been that way. In China, that's not how it works. So it's important that people begin to rise above rise above their political ideology to prioritize national interests over short-term political gains. Without these measures, the West will continue to fall behind. Simple.
And what are lessons to be learned from China's rise as an economic powerhouse? Are there aspects of its strategy that could be replicated in other countries?
Yes, yes, and here's why I like that question, because you see there are lessons to them. You have to recognize that China has been successful. Agree with their ideas, agree with their philosophy, agree with their values or not, they have results that you can't deny, right? So you once want to look at how they've achieved what they achieved and see what you can learn from that. And with the first thing that I see is strategic planning. For China, strategic planning is key. Economic success is not accidental. It doesn't just happen, right? It requires long-term vision and it requires state support. That's why the state exists. You see, now, of one of the reasons why the state exists, before they will take it out of context and say Dr. Ruben said that the reason why the state exists is economic success. Okay. Now, secondly, global influence requires economic strength. China's power comes from its ability to shape global markets. So states have to develop the ability. They have to forge the ability to influence and to shape global markets. And it's not just going to happen because you want to do that. It has to happen because you take coordinated actions. You make strategic moves, right? You rise above short-term political gains and pursue national interests. That's how it works. Then thirdly, national interest must be prioritized. I said a little bit of that already. And governments must take an active role in securing their economies. If Western nations do not adapt, they will continue to struggle against China's economic expansion. That's just the truth.
See, thank you. And then to conclude, do you have any final thoughts or remarks?
Absolutely. And these will be my final thoughts. China's competitive strategy is built on long-term planning, government support and intervention, and global economic entanglement. Now, that's not what you find in Western nations that rely on short-term political cycles. China executes its strategy over decades. That makes it resilient, to containment efforts. If Western nations wish to compete effectively, and if any nation wants to rise, whether it is in Africa or Asia, whether it's Nigeria or any other country you want to rise, right? They must rethink their economic policies. They must invest in domestic manufacturing and strengthen strategic alliances. If there is no coherent and long-term response, China will continue to expand its dominance, across critical sectors. It doesn't matter the number of tariffs you impose on China. Without this, the tariffs will hardly achieve the intended results.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Brian Rubin, Executive Chairman and founder of the 16th Council for Public Policy Square. Thank you for listening. Bye.